Have you ever stood at a crossroads in your life, staring ahead and realized you can't see past the next few steps? You squint, hoping for a sign. Maybe a clear sky, a flashing light, a whisper from heaven. But all you get is fog. Thick, grey, unnerving fog. Welcome back to Fireplace Conversations, where we sit heart to heart and talk about what it really means to lead, to grow, and to navigate this winding path of life and leadership. I'm your host, Dr. Ikechukwu Okoh, emergency physician, executive coach, investor, and most importantly, a student of life. This episode is a little different. Not because it's packed with stories and strategy, we always bring that, but because it speaks to something we all quietly battle. How do I make confident decisions when everything feels uncertain? How do I lead my team when I don't even know what tomorrow holds? How do I say yes to that opportunity when I don't have all the answers? How do I move forward when nothing is guaranteed? If you've ever felt that tension between courage and confusion, between hope and hesitation, you're not alone. In fact, I've been there more times than I'd like to admit. Let me take you back to 2023. I was in Saudi Arabia at the time, working long shifts in emergency medicine. One morning after a grueling night in the ER, I got a message from a colleague in the UK. There's a fast-track global fellowship opportunity with the NHS, but the window is short. You'd need to move quickly. Would you be open to relocating? Now, on the surface, it sounded like the very thing I had been praying for. But in my heart, all I felt was fog. I had questions, too many questions. Where would my family stay? Would I need to redo licensing? What if I wasn't ready? What if I failed the interview? I sat in my flat, pacing. I couldn't see the whole staircase, just the first few slippery steps. And then I remembered something my late mentor once told me. Leadership is not about always knowing, it's about choosing in the not knowing. That one sentence gave me the courage to take the first step, not because I was certain of the outcome, but because I was certain of the direction I wanted my life to grow. That's what this episode is about. It's about the seasons when vision is clouded, but purpose is calling. It's about how we, as leaders in business, in healthcare, in family, can navigate uncertainty without becoming paralyzed by it. Because uncertainty is not an obstacle. It's an environment. And you were born to move through it, not get stuck in it. Let me ask you a question as we begin today. When was the last time you had to make a decision with limited information? Maybe it was about your career. Maybe it was whether to say yes to that partnership. Maybe it was deciding whether to speak up in that meeting, unsure of how it would land. I want you to think about that moment. What did it feel like? Were you anxious? Frozen? Did you overanalyze it to death? Or maybe you did what most of us do, we delay. The longer you delay in fog, the more disoriented you become. Because fog doesn't lift with time. It lifts with movement. Let me say that again for someone listening today. Fog doesn't lift with time, it lifts with movement. And the leaders who thrive, even in unpredictable economies, volatile industries, or chaotic emergency rooms, are not the ones who wait for clarity. They're the ones who learn to move with wisdom when clarity is absent. That's what we'll uncover in this 3-part episode, in part 1 titled The Fog We All Face. We'll explore the psychology of uncertainty. Why does it scare us? How do high performers react under pressure? And why is it so tempting to pretend we know, even when we don't? We'll draw on stories from real leaders, including a quiet janitor in Delta State who taught me more about decision-making than some CEOs I've met. In part 2, titled Anchors in the Storm, We'll unpack decision-making frameworks that help. From the OODA Loop used by fighter pilots, to the 10-10-10 rule popularized by Susie Welch, to a simple tool I use called Clarity in Chaos. We'll also talk about the role of faith, intuition, and experience, and how to marry logic with gut when the path is foggy. In part 3, titled Bold Moves in Blurry Moments, we'll get very practical. What do you do when the stakes are high and you must decide? I'll walk you through how I made one of the hardest decisions of my career, resigning from a high-level leadership position in Nigeria to pursue a more global path without a guaranteed outcome. We'll talk about how to communicate uncertain decisions to your team, how to build confidence after making the wrong call, and how to keep moving when people are watching you lead through the mist. I want you to picture this moment like we're sitting by an actual fireplace. The room is warm. The light is low. You have a drink in hand, maybe tea, maybe coffee. Maybe something stronger, we don't judge here. And we're just talking. Two leaders, two humans. Figuring it out, one honest conversation at a time. Because that's what Fireplace Conversations is really about. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about creating a room where real leaders can be real, about doubt, fear, wins, failures, and foggy days. So before we jump in, let me leave you with a thought. In every season of fog, there is still a compass within you. And while you may not know what's ahead, you can still take the next step with intention. That's what courage looks like. Let's get into it. When I was a little boy growing up in Abavo, Delta State, there was a certain time of year we called Harmattan mornings. You'd wake up and look outside and everything would be white, not from snow, but from thick, dry fog. You couldn't see 2 feet in front of you. As kids, we thought it was fun. We'd run into it, waving our arms around like airplanes, but the adults moved slower. The farmers delayed their walk to the fields. The market women waited for the air to clear before setting out. Even then, I noticed something. Uncertainty slows people down. And that truth doesn't change with age or title. Whether you're a farmer or a founder, a nurse or a nation leader, uncertainty does something to the brain. It puts us on edge. But why? Why do we panic when we can't predict? Why is not knowing often more terrifying than knowing something bad? Let's talk about that today. Let's talk about the psychology of fog. There's a study by Harvard researchers where participants were given the choice between receiving an electric shock now or a 50% chance of receiving the same shock in the next 10 minutes. Guess what most people chose? They picked the immediate shock. Because the anxiety of not knowing when it's coming was worse than the pain itself. Let that sink in. We, as humans, are more stressed by uncertainty than by discomfort. It's why waiting for exam results is harder than writing the exam. It's why startup founders fear pitch rejection emails more than actual rejections. It's why workers lose sleep over rumors of layoffs even when no one has said a word. Uncertainty is cognitive fog, and fog confuses the senses. Now the big question is, what do high performers do when they don't know? Let's be honest. When high performers face uncertainty, we often respond in 3 ways. 1. Over-control. We start micromanaging. We try to force clarity by taking control of every small detail. If I can't see ahead, let me obsess over what's right in front of me. But the truth is, control can become a distraction, a false sense of progress. I once had a coaching client called Tolu, a healthcare CEO. She told me, When COVID hit, I started personally checking stock levels of PPE every day. It felt productive, but I now realize I did it because I was scared of the bigger picture. Sometimes we cling to small tasks because they give us the illusion of certainty. 2. Overthink. This is my personal favorite, or should I say my personal trap. We go into analysis paralysis. We want every data point, every scenario mapped out. We tell ourselves, once I have enough information, I'll move. But the world doesn't work like that anymore. Especially not in healthcare, not in tech, not in leadership. We're living in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. Waiting for full clarity is like waiting for rain in the desert. You'll stay thirsty. 3. Over-delay. This is the most dangerous of all. We freeze. We say, let's wait and see. We'll revisit this next quarter. Or the classic, now is not the right time. And while you wait, opportunities close, teams lose momentum, competitors move ahead. Your people begin to wonder, does our leader even have a plan? This is what you should know. Uncertainty does not kill progress, delay does. I'll say that again, just in case you're writing this down. Uncertainty does not kill progress, delay does. And the best leaders don't delay indefinitely. They make informed, imperfect decisions. Let me tell you a story. Many years ago, I was working at a public hospital in Asaba. There was a janitor named Mr. Sunday. A quiet man in his early 50s. He was always mopping the corridors before most people arrived. One morning, we were dealing with a staffing crisis. 2 doctors had called in sick. The ER was filling up. No clear plan, no backup. I must have been visibly stressed because Mr. Sunday walked up to me and said, "Doctor, there is one thing I always do when rain is too heavy." I looked at him puzzled. He continued, "I don't run fast. I just pick one direction and walk slowly. Before I know, I have gotten to my destination." That simple wisdom hit me hard. Sometimes when the fog is heavy, you don't need speed. You need direction and deliberate motion. Mr. Sunday didn't know he was teaching me a leadership principle. But that one conversation shaped how I now approach uncertainty. Don't rush, don't freeze. Just move slowly and purposefully in the direction of your values. Here's another truth we don't like to admit. When we say we're uncertain, what we often mean is, I'm afraid of choosing wrong. That's the real issue. We fear blame, we fear regret, we fear reputational damage. I remember once advising a young founder from Kenya. She was launching a digital health platform but couldn't decide whether to raise pre-seed funding or bootstrap longer. She told me, "It's so unclear, Dr. Ike, I don't want to make the wrong move." After listening, I asked her, "What would you do if you weren't afraid of being wrong?" Her answer came instantly. "I'd raise now, I have momentum." That moment unlocked her clarity. The fog wasn't external, it was emotional. Sometimes the fog we fear is just the echo of our own fear of failure. And once you name that fear, you take away its power. In traditional leadership, we were taught to know the way, show the way, go the way. But in modern leadership, the game has changed. You don't always know the way. Sometimes you must navigate the way. That's the difference between being a tour guide and a trailblazer. Tour guides work with maps while trailblazers make maps through trial, error, courage, and faith. And the moment you accept that uncertainty is part of your leadership journey, you free yourself from the pressure to pretend. Because pretending you know when you don't is a fast road to mistrust. Your team doesn't need you to be perfect. They need you to be present, honest, and responsive. Before we close this part of the episode, let me leave you with some reflection prompts. When you find yourself in a foggy situation, ask, what is certain even if everything else isn't? Your values, long-term vision, or trust in your team? What's the worst that could happen, and could I survive it? What do I not need to know right now? What matters most in this moment? Who can I call who's walked a similar path? What small move can I make today that aligns with my direction? What fog are you facing right now? Is it a business decision? A family move? A transition in your career? Whatever it is, I want to remind you that fog is not failure. It's just a moment, a phase, a weather pattern. You're not stuck. You're evolving. You're growing. You're learning to navigate. In the next part of this episode, I'll share practical tools, from military frameworks to leadership tools I personally use, to help you anchor yourself when the storm comes. Because leadership is not about avoiding uncertainty. It's about learning to move with the fog. This is Fireplace Conversations. If you've made it this far, I want to say two things. First, thank you. Second, you're not alone. Uncertainty might feel personal, but trust me, it's universal. Every leader you admire has had moments where they felt blindfolded, balancing on a tightrope, trying not to fall. We've all been there. And here's the good news. While we can't eliminate uncertainty, we can develop anchors that hold us steady in the storm. So today I want to share some of those anchors with you. Some are frameworks used by pilots and military strategists. Some are questions I ask myself during big decisions. And some come from years of seeing what actually works in emergency rooms, boardrooms, and in the mirror when nobody's watching. Let's start with a simple question. What's an anchor? In the real world, an anchor holds a ship in place when the waters get rough. It doesn't stop the storm. It simply keeps the vessel from drifting too far. In leadership, an anchor is a principle, a process, or a mindset that keeps you grounded when everything around you is spinning. You don't need the fog to clear before you act. You just need to drop anchor. Let me show you how. Anchor 1, the OODA Loop: Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. One of my favorite frameworks comes from military aviation is the OODA Loop. It was developed by US Air Force Colonel John Boyd to help fighter pilots make rapid decisions in chaotic situations. Let me break it down. Observe what's happening, what's the situation, what do I see, and what am I missing? Orient, where am I in relation to the challenge? What context, biases, or values affect how I see this? Decide, based on what I know, what's the best course of action right now? Act, execute, test the decision, and be ready to loop again. This isn't a one-time event, it's a cycle. And in volatile environments like an ER, a startup pivot, or public health crisis, it helps you stay nimble. Here's a quick story. Back in the ER one night, we had 3 trauma patients arrive within 10 minutes. One with internal bleeding, one with a head injury. There wasn't time for a team meeting. One unconscious. No room for perfection. I remembered OODA. Observe, I quickly scanned vitals. Orient, I knew who was stable, who wasn't. Decide, we split the team, I handled airway, the most critical. Act, we moved, we adapted, we looped. We saved all 3 lives. Not because we had a perfect plan, but because we had a reliable process. That's the power of OODA. Anchor 2, the 10-10-10 rule. This one's simple but powerful. It was popularized by Susie Welch, and it's changed the way many people make decisions. When facing a choice, ask, how will I feel about this in 10 minutes? How will I feel about it in 10 months? How will I feel about it in 10 years? Let's say you're deciding whether to resign from a draining job. In 10 minutes, you may feel anxious. In 10 months, you might be rebuilding your confidence. But in 10 years, you'll likely be proud you made the leap. This framework creates emotional distance. It lifts your eyes from the fog and helps you see the horizon. I used this method when I chose to move from Saudi Arabia to the UK. In the short term, the decision was stressful. But long term, it opened up unimaginable doors, from NHS roles to thought leadership to conversations like this one. So when fog clouds your view, zoom out. Ask your future self what they'd want you to do. Anchor 3, the Clarity and Chaos Checklist. This one is mine. Over the years, I've developed a simple 5-question checklist I run through whenever I'm facing a foggy situation. I call it Clarity and Chaos. Here it is. What outcome am I responsible for? Not just what outcome I desire. What decision aligns with my values, even if it's harder? What option gives me more options later, not less? What's the cost of not deciding right now? What story will I tell myself about this decision 1 year from now? This checklist has saved me from overthinking. And it's helped many of my coaching clients too, especially startup founders navigating rapid shifts. Anchor 4, Inner Stillness, the Wisdom of Pause. Let me tell you something I've learned the hard way. Urgency is not always clarity. Sometimes when we feel foggy, we panic and rush. We fear that if we don't act fast, we'll fall behind. But the truth is, sometimes the most strategic move is to pause. Not postpone indefinitely, but pause intentionally. One of my mentors once told me, silence is not the absence of strategy, it is often the beginning of one. If you're a faith-based person, this might mean prayer. If you're scientific, it might mean data gathering. If you're intuitive, it might mean stepping away for 24 hours to breathe and reset. Whatever your method, make room for stillness. Because clarity rarely comes in chaos. It comes in the quiet that follows. Anchor 5, your counsel circle. No one sees their blind spots alone. That's why every leader needs a counsel circle, a small group of 2 to 3 trusted voices you can call when the path is unclear. I'm not talking about social media followers or LinkedIn connections. I mean real people who know your values, your past, and your capacity. For me, it's 3 people. A mentor in the UK who's 15 years ahead of me. A peer founder in Africa who shares my business context. My wife, because she sees the man behind the title. These are my sounding boards. When I feel foggy, I don't broadcast, I call them. Because in uncertainty, insight from trusted voices is better than information from random sources. If you don't have a counsel circle yet, build one. Pick people who aren't just smart, but who want to see you win, not just your career. Anchor 6, mental models, thinking in probabilities, not perfection. Let's get practical again. One mindset shift that changed everything for me was learning to think in probabilities, not perfection. In medicine, we're trained to work with differential diagnoses. It's rarely, this is definitely the answer. It's, these are the most likely possibilities, and here's how we'll manage them. Apply that to leadership. You don't need 100% certainty. You need enough confidence to act and enough humility to adapt. Let's say you're launching a new product. Don't ask, will this work? Ask, what's the likelihood it will succeed based on current signals? And what's my fallback plan if it doesn't? This shift frees you from the paralysis of needing to be right. Instead, you focus on being responsible. And that is authentic leadership. I want to introduce a little tool I use before big public decisions. I call it the fireplace filter. Here's how it works. Before I make a difficult choice, I imagine I'm explaining it beside a fire. To someone I respect, someone I love, someone who knows me deeply. Would I be proud to share this decision with them? Would I say I did this for the right reasons with the best wisdom I had at the time? If the answer is yes, I move forward. If I hesitate, I go back and rethink. Because in leadership, your legacy is not just what you did, but why you did it. And the decisions made in integrity age better than the ones made in panic. My friend, uncertainty may cloud the sky, but anchors keep your ship steady. You don't need to predict the future. You just need tools to respond wisely to it. OODA 10-10-10. Clarity in chaos. Inner stillness. Council circle. Thinking in probabilities. The fireplace filter. Which one speaks to you today? Pick one, use it, make it your anchor in the storm. And remember, fog doesn't mean you're lost. It just means you need to move more mindfully. In our final part of this episode, we'll shift gears. It's time for real decisions, high stakes, and bold moves. I'll share how I made one of the toughest calls in my career. We'll talk about recovering from wrong turns and how to keep leading even when people look to you for clarity you don't yet have. So far, we've talked about the fog. We've unpacked the psychology behind it. We've looked at the frameworks that help. But what do you do when you can't wait anymore? When a decision has to be made? When everyone's looking at you, the leader, the parent, the founder, the doctor, and you still feel unsure? Welcome to part 3, titled Bold Moves in Blurry Moments. Let's talk about action. Real action. The kind that defines leadership, not by the certainty of its outcome, but by the courage of its intention. Let me begin with a story, one I've never fully shared publicly before. Years ago, I was serving in a leadership role back in Nigeria. I had spent years climbing, building teams, advocating for better systems. I was well respected. Break time, once comfortable and established. But inside I was restless. I began to sense that my impact had a ceiling, that I was operating more in maintenance than in mission, that I had more to offer beyond borders, beyond titles. At the same time, I had an opportunity to move to Saudi Arabia. It promised international exposure, policy work, bigger platforms, but it also meant leaving everything familiar behind. No guarantees, just an open door and a foggy view. I had a family, a reputation, a career. What if I failed? For weeks I wrestled. I paced, I prayed, I journaled, I did every framework I just taught you. And eventually I chose to leap. Not because I had full clarity, but because I had deep conviction. That decision, though hard, changed the entire trajectory of my life and influence. Here's what I've learned. Every decision you make in uncertainty is a vote for the person you are becoming. You're not just choosing a job, a location, or a product roadmap. You're choosing to be the kind of leader who acts in fog. And that choice forms your character. You don't become bold after the fog clears. You become bold in the fog, one step at a time. So if you're facing a hard call right now, ask not just what's right, but who am I becoming by making this choice? Let's be real. You will make wrong calls. I've made them. I once joined a startup advisory board and invested in what looked promising on paper. But I ignored a red flag, the founder's inability to accept feedback. 6 months later, the culture was toxic and the startup folded. I felt embarrassed, disappointed, even questioned my judgment. But here's the gift. I debriefed that experience. I asked, what did I miss? I updated my filters. I became sharper. Now I ask every founder one new question. Tell me about the last time you changed your mind after receiving feedback. If they can't answer that, I don't invest. So here's my encouragement to you. A bad decision doesn't define you, but how you recover from it does. Apologize when needed. Debrief what went wrong. Extract the lesson. And move again. Every wrong turn can still move you forward if you grow from it. Let's talk about one of the hardest realities. Sometimes people will expect clarity from you when you don't have it yourself. You're the manager, the founder, the senior consultant, the one who should know. What do you do? Here's what I've learned. 1. Be honest without being hopeless. It's okay to say, we don't have all the answers yet. Just pair it with, here's what we're doing now and here's what we're watching. 2. Focus on process, not prediction. Don't pretend to forecast the future. Instead, say, here's how we'll make decisions as new information comes in. 3. Anchor them in purpose. Say things like, we may not control the fog, but we can control how we move through it together. 4. Model calm confidence. Calm is contagious, and so is panic. Your tone is a leadership tool. In the ER, when patients are crashing and we don't yet know the cause, I've learned this. The louder the uncertainty, the quieter I become. Not because I'm faking peace, but because I'm choosing it. When making uncertain decisions, I recommend using a structure I call the 4 C's of courageous communication. Context. What's the situation we're responding to? Clarity. What have we decided? Care. How will this affect people and how are we considering them? Confidence. Why do we believe this is the best step even if it's not perfect? Let's not sugarcoat it. Sometimes the fog doesn't clear the way you hoped. Sometimes the outcome is painful. A new role that didn't fit. A team restructure that backfired. A launch that flopped. The real test of leadership is, can you stay with the consequences of your choices long enough to learn from them? Don't abandon your decision at the first sign of discomfort. Stay, learn, recalibrate. You'll come out with deeper wisdom and stronger shoulders. Before we close, I want to share one more story. My father once told me this. The strongest leaders don't always see far, they just see true. At the time, I didn't fully understand, but now I do. Sometimes leadership isn't about foresight. It's about insight, seeing what matters even in the fog. It is about truth, integrity, direction, and courage. If you hold on to those, you'll find your way. Let's recap what we've learned. Your identity grows when you decide, not when you delay. Wrong decisions aren't fatal, they're feedback. Lead with process, not perfect answers. Communicate with context, clarity, care, and confidence. Stay with the consequences, learn from them. Anchor your actions in values, even when the outcome is unclear. My friend, if you're standing in fog right now, if you're wondering what to do next, let this episode be your firelight. You may not see the end of the road, but you can take the next step, and then the next. One act of courage, one anchored choice, one bold move in a blurry moment. they are the ones who kept moving with honesty, with humility, and with hope. And you, my friend, you're one of them. If this episode resonated with you, I want to invite you to do 3 things. Share this with one leader you respect, someone navigating their own fog right now. Write down one decision you've been delaying and take one small step toward it. It could be a phone call, a journal entry, or a commitment. Tag me at Ikechukwu Okoh on LinkedIn or Twitter with your insight from this episode. I'd love to hear how you're moving forward, even if the future is foggy. Thank you for joining me for episode 9 of Fireplace Conversations. Remember this: you don't need perfect clarity to lead. You just need courage to move. And the fog doesn't last forever. I'll see you next time. Until then, keep the fire burning